thank you for coming, everybody, today. So we will just get right down to it, because like I said, I have a lot to discuss. Hopefully we can get to it all. So I'm gonna see if I can get a motion to approve our November meeting minutes. Did everybody have time to review them?
From the 5th, right?
November 3rd.
Oh, November.
Yes.
Yeah, I did. I don't know what I did. I picked up the wrong ones.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
No changes.
So, yeah, it was in the email.
Yeah.
I read it.
Did anybody want to make a motion to approve it, or did anybody have any edits?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Aye.
So, meeting minutes approved. We don't have anybody to speak? Nobody that you know of that was coming either?
Actually, I thought Bob Gibson was coming, but he's not here.
No, he talked to me earlier.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, on to new business. So we have introduction of our new Marine and Aviation Director.
So I'll just come up here and introduce myself to you guys, tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Eric Gandy. I spent the last 30 and a half years with Clearwater PD. The last 5 as the Deputy Chief of Operations. A little bit of my history. So early on in my career, or actually prior to my career in law enforcement, my father was an aerial photographer and had an interest in Peter R. Knight Airport over in Tampa. And as such, as a young guy in high school and in college, I got a couple VFR ratings and used to spend a lot of time flying him local and statewide VFR flights for aerial photography. So that's how I kind of got familiar with aviation. I detailed more than a few planes, put fuel in a few planes over the years and moved them around back in the day. But that's when I was in high school and college. And the first aircraft I flew is hanging in the lobby of Tampa Police Department. So kind of a neat story. I always thought after I retired I'd do something in either the marine or aviation business, and I find myself here's the director, and I'm glad to be working with you guys, and I look forward to having the opportunity for you to provide us input and ask questions related to the facilities. And I think it's always good to have different perspectives on things, no matter what position you're in, no matter what department you serve. I do recognize that sometimes it's a challenge being on a board such as this, because you can't communicate amongst each other. So you're in silos, and this is the dialogue that you're able to participate in, or information that we share with you. So, my goal is to try and share information when it's pertinent and relevant when I'm able to do so. And like I said, I appreciate it.
So I have one question for you. Did
Sure.
you, I guess, get filled in from Ed of like things that we had talked about prior that we were hoping that?
No, Ed departed before I arrived, certainly. So there's really no ability other than me watching a couple older meetings and reviewing some of the agendas to get a little bit of a feel for what's going on. Now, I will tell you, and I'll talk more about it during my report to you, but there's a lot going on related to the Airpark that we can discuss. But I've got a perspective being on the law enforcement side. I was the one they called at 2 o'clock in the morning because a plane landed. I know the sensitivity of the community sometimes as it pertains to the Airpark. So being here over 30 years, I have some familiarity, as do I have familiarity with some of the FBO type operations. So, hopefully that will be helpful in the level of engagement. But, kind of joking with Mike, and if you asked me to regurgitate green print before you now, it would be a miserable failure. So it's those types of things that I think if we prepare for them, if you want a presentation on a certain topic, we certainly like to prepare for that and be able to answer and provide cogent, pertinent answers rather than drift all over the place and try and wing it. I never like to wing it. I like to provide you with facts and information.
Okay.
Is your, so you have a private pilot's license?
Oh, I haven't been current in 20 years.
Well, I was just gonna ask whether,
Yeah, no. So I started in law enforcement, and that all but ended my aviation aspirations, as did my contact lenses and some other things. But no, so I probably had 800, 1,000 VFR hours only. And it was single and multi-engine because those are a couple of the platforms we use for the aerophotography business. And I've got a lot of time and a lot of different things, but it's all VFR. Very simplistic rudimentary. You have to have great weather to go fly and take pictures. So, yeah, I relied on my dad for that. He had commercial ATP, every rating under the sun. I just flew track lines and turn here, turn there. But yeah.
well, if you have the certificate, it's still there.
It's still there. I found it, and I found it. It's all cruddy looking, but I got it.
I was curious. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, next will be the fixed base operators report from Barb. Hi, Barb.
So, as you might suspect, all hangars are still rented. Tie downs, we have had a few tie downs open up. Some of the winter visitors went home. And it was good because April and March were super busy. Spring break, sun and fun, etc. So we used a lot of our open tie downs for visitor parking. And, probably the two busiest months we've had in quite a while. We continue to add airplanes to the waiting list. Even when you tell them it's going to be very long, they still want to be added to the waiting list. So that continues to grow. Other than that, that's all I had to report. We do have a Young Eagles rally coming up on Saturday. Bruce will talk more about that, I'm sure. But any questions at all?
Guaranteed it's good weather, right?
I heard it's not going to be so good on Saturday. We'll see.
I have a couple of questions. Are you guys doing your open house?
We haven't scheduled it this year yet. We can always do it in the fall, so that's something we'll talk about.
So pending. And then I think it was at our last meeting that we talked about possibly extending the parking pads or painting spots for the wheels at the tie-down taxiway.
Well, I know Tampa Bay Aviation, which is in the area that you're referring to.
Yeah.
They did put paint lines so that their planes are parked behind those lines to avoid any of that. And there's only one or maybe two planes out there other than Tampa Bay Aviation. So.
Yeah, I wasn't sure who was going to be the one doing it, but that's great to hear.
Yeah, they
that
did.
was done.
They did. They painted lines for their nose wheel, and as long as they're behind those, and we do the best we can for visitors if anybody happens to get in there to make sure they're pushed back.
Yeah. So that's great to hear. And then my last one, we know everybody's getting hit with fuel prices, and I know previously you guys have said you try to stay pretty competitive, but I looked this morning, and in some cases for untowered airports, the Airpark's up to almost $2 more than some of the other untowered.
You talking about self-service?
Well, I looked for the FBOs, whatever their prices were.
Well, we can't compete with self-service, of course, because they're not paying for a fuel truck or lineman or anything like that. So that's always been the case, that if you find, you have to look at, you have to compare things correctly. So if it's fuel trucks, I just looked the other day, if it's full service, we're still the lowest. I think there was one airport in our 50-mile radius that was about 10 cents lower than us.
Okay.
And don't forget, it depends, these prices are so volatile, it depends when you get your truck in. These
Yeah.
prices are changing drastically day by day. I just got a fuel order in today, and I guarantee you it's going up.
Yeah.
So, they might advertise on TV that fuel's going down. It goes down a few cents, but when it goes up, it's been going up. When we got our jet order the last time, it went up $1 from the previous order. So we're just reacting to the industry. It's crazy. I think this order is probably going up at least another 10 or 20 cents. I haven't gotten the invoice yet, but.
So do you think the Airpark would ever be able to do something like Arcadia, where they're able to keep their fuel prices lower, which I know they do have the self-service, so there would be a little bit of an adjustment, but they...
Well, you're talking about Arcadia, which is in a remote area. I don't know what their fuel supplier charges them. I don't know if it's self-service or not. I don't know if it's a municipality, you know, if it's a municipality, maybe they only make a few cents on a gallon. You know, we do the best we can, but we are in business,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, yeah, I know they have people from all over the state that fly there to get fuel because it is cheap.
Well, you're always gonna have that, you know, people will waste 10 gallons of gas to go save 20 cents. I can't control that, you know?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up
Right,
because I
and
know
I
I've
mean,
been hearing
I'm not
about
being
it.
defensive, I'm just telling you, you
No.
know. We look at all the, within a 50-mile radius, but what you're not mentioning is St. Pete's at $9 a gallon, you know, so we're $2 a gallon less than them. We're less than Albert Whitted, we're less than Sarasota, you know, we're less than all the airports like us, so.
Yeah, I didn't count those because they're all towered airports, so they have that additional
Right, but,
expense
you
going
know,
on.
we do it within a 50 nautical mile radius. There's an air nav that you can look on, but then it prints self-service or full service. But believe me, we check all that, and we try to be the lowest of all of that, except for self-service,
Okay.
okay?
Does anybody else have any other questions?
I did have one question.
Uh-huh,
I came out there to look around yesterday. You have a pretty thick parking lot there, a lot of cars. Is there any sort of overflow, or is it just?
that we have to deal with the space we have, and unfortunately, the parking lot we have outgrown the parking lot. I'm not sure what, you know, if it's on the master plan to change any of that, but they do park in the grass over by Civil Air Patrol or down the fence line.
Oh, I did.
Right, yeah.
It is in the master plan to change the parking.
Oh, good.
Barb, just following up on the fuel issues, do you see aircraft coming over to fuel at Clearwater Airpark?
Yes.
You know, instead of getting fuel at other places?
We do.
Yeah.
Just the other day, we had some people come because Albert Whitted's fuel truck was broken down, so we have that too. But, yeah, especially bigger airplanes, our jet fuel, you know, if they're coming to either St. Pete or Clearwater, some of the planes that can come into our airport will come because our fuel price is a lot less than theirs.
I wonder. When I was at Sun and Fun, I just by accident ran into some guys that are in the Coast Guard auxiliary, but they're not boat guys, they're airplane guys, and they assist the Coast Guard in aerial searches. They use their own airplanes, and they were talking to me about it, and I just wondered, have you had any, I guess, have any of the Coast Guard people come to you and talked about that, maybe setting up some sort of auxiliary at the airport? I know the Civil Air Patrol is there, but I didn't know that. It's the first time I run into guys that actually fly for the Coast Guard.
Right.
So I didn't know whether they had ever approached you.
I
about
don't
it.
recall ever talking to them. I know the Coast Guard is based at St. Pete,
Yeah.
so I don't know if their auxiliary would be there as well.
Well, they're just pilots like you and I,
And it would depend if they require office space or something, because we don't have any office space, unfortunately,
yeah.
right now.
Well, I just wondered if they'd ever approached you.
Not to my knowledge
Okay.
while I've been there.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have anything? No? Thanks, Barb.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next we'll be electing the 2022 chair and vice chair.
Can we have nominations for chair, please?
Nominations for chair.
Nominate you
Okay.
for chair.
And,
Could I have a motion to reappoint Kelly as
Real fast, all in favor?
well, you gotta make the motion. You gotta make the motion
I
first.
move. I so move.
second,
Second.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
I'll accept. Okay, so,
Got it, kid. Don't screw it up.
okay, so we need some nominations or a nomination for vice chair. Well, I guess real
Not
quick
here,
for
I'd say Ray McNeil.
I'd say a quick discussion, maybe we wanna have, if everybody's not familiar, is you can't elect the ex officio members into the chair, okay, just so that everybody knows, you can't vote Bruce in, right?
I did get one,
So, just so everybody,
to keep a mouth shut.
you can talk. You can- Okay, so motion, or suggestion for vice chair. Is anybody interested in
Is it nice
doing it?
guy?
You wanna
No?
nominate yourself?
No,
I'd be happy to fill the void if
Okay, since
nobody else is gonna step forward.
I nominate you then?
Second.
Oh, I can't, okay. Somebody else needs to nominate.
well, I'll nominate him.
Okay.
Thank you.
There you go.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Welcome to the vice chair position.
Congratulations.
Be happy to help.
Okay. So I do not think we have any old business items at this time, so next will be our director's report.
Oh, Eric Gandy again. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things just for formality purposes. So we've got a council item coming up, moving through the process for the 15th for an amendment to the FDOT grant to, for the security system upgrades. So they're going to contribute 53,000, and we're going to put in 12 for the upgrades to the fiber, so we can integrate all the cameras and have effective security system coverage. So that'll be going before council on the 15th. In terms of, and I know you mentioned, capital improvement and things of that nature, and the master plan. So we're looking at the tarmac apron mill and overlay project. So you'll learn about me relatively quickly. I'm all about operational readiness and safety. So that's really going to be our focus going forward. I mean, I like amenities, those are wonderful, but we're talking about a high liability business and a high liability function, and we got to make sure that we address safety issues. Certainly the tarmac, if you go to Walmart and the parking lot's in rough shape, it's no big deal if someone doesn't address it. If you're in an Airpark and someone's running up an engine and it picks up a bunch of gravel, it's a problem. So we have to be mindful of that, and we're doing the research and studies necessary to make sure we address that as required. Certainly we operate within a budget, so we always have to be mindful of those considerations, even with the contributions from FDOT and generosity of FDOT. They've been very good to this Airpark for many, many years, so that's something that we consider is what their match potentially would be, but we also have a budget that we're constrained by. There's some other items on there, some of the shade hangers and things like that, and we've done some evaluations there. So we're looking at all aspects, but like I said, I make a lot of value judgments based on a real pragmatic approach to safety and operational readiness. So that's a big deal to me. I want to talk a little bit about business, or the business of Airparks and FBOs. So, I've only been in the seat about a month, and I've already heard a lot about, the lease is terming out in November for this Airpark and the FBO operation by Mr. King and the manager, Barb. And it's funny because as these things term, you start to hear more about them. So everyone has an idea. Ultimately, the city's going to exercise due diligence. The Airpark's currently undergoing an audit as we speak. We've also have a draft of a market rate study for square footage, lease space, hangar space, what those are going for, and is the FBO in line with kind of industry standards or the norm. So we have that. We're going through it. We're identifying any issues that need to be addressed by the consultant, and then we'll have that, and we will supply you guys with that information once it's done review. With the lease terming out, I've had conversations with city management because we're still studying what our options are. We're looking at, the potential to evaluate, does the city look at that as something that the city should be running? Should the city be running an FBO? Should we put it out in the field and get proposals from interested entities? we're bound to do that legally at a point in time during the course of this. But like I said, we've discussed with city management and legal, and we're probably going to be doing a lease extension for a 1-year term with Mr. King to provide the city time to do a thorough evaluation and determine what the best strategy is going forward. So like I said, I told you earlier, I like to evaluate things and make sure we're doing them correctly. So it's going to probably take more time than we have to get an RFP in the field, do the evaluation. So we'll probably end up having to extend the lease for a period of 1 year, and then moving forward during the course of that year with our evaluations and potentially the RFP to determine what the interest is in the private sector to do something of that nature. And I suspect, as any of you might, having run it for many, many years, that Mr. King would be participating in that RFP process as well. Any questions?
Yeah, what consultants are doing the evaluation?
So, got a real estate consultant, Slack Johnson and Magenheimer.
Okay. Do they have any aviation background at all?
So, no, they're doing just a market analysis. So they're going around and comparing. This thing is 100 and some odd pages long. So, like I said, when it's completed, I'll be able to share it with all of you. But, you know, there was a couple of errors that we picked up on. They thought there were some precision approaches there, but those are legacy approaches from many years ago. So we've identified a couple things that they're going to address in the appraisal, and then certainly I'll share it with you guys, and you have the opportunity to read it as well.
Thank you.
It's a little early, but the golf course lease terms out in about 8 years.
Right.
Is there any discussion or thought about expanding the Airpark operation into at least some of that land?
Well, it's been talked about. I think in the master plan, there's references to that as an opportunity. I don't know if you followed council in their discussion over that property and turning it into a light industrial. There's no desire to do that. So I don't want to speak for council, but I think we all saw the temperature of the community around that, and they rallied against a light industrial in lieu of the green space. So it would be speculative for me to say, but yes, it's been incorporated into.
Well, I guess the point then is, if that comes to fruition as we move towards the end of that lease, we'd like to request, I think,
Yeah.
for new chair, that this board be one of the first to know about it, or be notified that thought process is on, so that we can be involved in it.
Well, 8 years is a long way away.
I know.
And certainly
not be here.
I take note of that, and I suspect we'll all know
Yeah.
when that comes to fruition, and because those discussions, I think, are going to be significant
Oh.
and be at the council level quite early.
I made the request because we didn't all know when the landings proposal came up.
Okay.
Yeah, we were
It was a
not
surprise.
informed or asked anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I mean, so.
I mean, I have to frame this carefully because I have to know to be able to share it. And if it's something that's not on our radar, now certainly that it's part of the master plan, it would be something. But I will tell you, I mean, we all know that to increase revenues, to increase activation, utilization, you run the risk of re-engaging the neighborhood that doesn't want to see one more takeoff or one more landing. So I think it's a balancing act in understanding what the facility is and what its maximum capacity is in terms of the neighborhood's tolerance for that activity. So it's definitely a balancing act.
Oh, yeah.
The Airpark, in my view, and listen, it has some limiting factors to significant increased activity, and that's no precision approaches, no crosswind landings. So those things are challenges. Does it have 24-hour operation? It may be in its sweet spot already, but we're going to evaluate all those things.
So I have a couple of questions. You had brought up with looking at funding, and you had mentioned the shade hangers, and this is something that Ed had told us that he had found money and it was earmarked for improvements to the shade hangers. Has that since been changed now?
No, so we do capital improvement budgeting, so we recognize in the future that we set some money aside. What usually happens, unfortunately, is we project those 6 years out, and no one would have predicted the inflationary environment we're in right now. I don't know if any of you guys have gone to the grocery store or the gas station lately, but those costs there's a ripple effect throughout the economy. So, your valuation 6 years ahead, it may be inconsistent with what the project requires. So when Ed says he found some money, I suspect he's referring to CIP money, and he's probably referring to FDOT matching grant money.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I just know he had said he had found recent money so that they could move up that shade hanger
That's probably what he's
fixing.
referring to. I would suspect, that's where the money comes from. The FBO pays us a lease and a portion of the fuel sales. We take some of that money to cover operating costs for us, capital improvement costs, and then ultimately and Mike and Ed did a good job of trying to predict future expenditures and putting money aside for those. So I suspect that's exactly what he's talking about. But what happens is and we're not there yet with the shade hangers, but let's say we get the complete analysis and what it's going to cost. What the estimated cost is when we silo the money or set it aside and what it actually is can be vastly different.
Let's see. We haven't heard anything recently. This is one of our requests that we want to be made aware of public comment, positive or negative, that you guys have been getting. So I haven't seen anything since our November meeting. So has there been anything, or has it been kind of quiet?
I think I saw one, I want to say it went to either the mayor or city manager related to, a potential noise issue, but I'm not aware of any significant issues beyond that type of thing.
Okay, I think that is the last one. And then just what was already brought up as far as the lease of, and this is why he brought up even though it's 8 years out for the golf course, because we know government takes a long time to make a decision, and maybe something was already being talked about, and like now in the case of the lease, it's already going to need to extend another year due to the time it's going to take to get all the information. So just say that yes, we want to be involved in the whole lease process and the whole golf course lease whenever that gets started too.
That's certainly longer term, but the lease will be shorter term, when we go out to RFP and get proposals and see what the interest is in the private sector. When we do those things, certainly your input is valued to us. It's not something that we would sit down with each of you and line item a lease, that's for sure.
No.
But we would engage in that level of dialogue, share a potential. But some of those, and I don't know the legal implications, but are business decisions that we have to contemplate too. So if it's hours of activity, things of that the board feels that we need to bring to council's attention for council action, certainly that's absolutely invited.
Yeah, I think we were talking more about once you have your pool of potential applicants, like just kind of being in that process of selection for that, not necessarily helping draft the RFP at all.
So that's that's a strange one because it's a legally specified process. So, I can investigate that and see what involvement the board can have outside the confines of this venue. And I'm not sure that there's an opportunity to insert a board member into the review board for an RFP.
No, but I mean like just discussing it here, like when you
Yeah.
come in, like just kind of keeping us updated,
Sure.
and then if
Sure.
you could just even have, here's our list of applicants,
Oh, yeah.
and give a summary of that. We
Yeah.
could give our input on
I think
what we
that,
think.
that's absolutely doable, and, certainly if someone came to us and said, we're gonna run a 24/7 air ambulance service with 8 helicopters day and night, I think you would wanna have some input on that, but certainly we bring anything like that to your attention. But, I'll have to work with legal in the process and procurement and make sure we're doing it correctly, and I share what I can share, and make sure that we don't run afoul of any sunshine law issues and things like that, because sometimes being a board member, it's a challenge to make sure that, you want to provide the input, but like I said at the beginning of this, you're all in these strange silos because you sit up here next to each other but can't cross-communicate, and it makes it challenging, so we have to air it all out here and have those conversations.
I think the request is just, we're an advisory board, and we'd like the opportunity to know what's going on or what they're thinking about and advise as an advisory board. Well, we think this is a good idea. We don't think that's the way it's proposed. That's a good idea. Maybe you could change it. That's all we're asking.
Sure.
The advisory boards are not what they were when they were first founded years ago. I've served on them for 30 years in this city. And, we meet quarterly.
Right.
We used to meet monthly.
Sure.
We reported to city council monthly.
Right. And this one's very unique too, because.
I know, because of the lessee. We've
Because
been
you have
told.
a lease agreement that's between the city and then, so where does the board fit in there other than to at least provide feedback to city and allow us to evaluate your concerns and the concerns of the constituency that you represent?
I find this to be a very interesting discussion. My whole career has been in aviation, both as senior management at multiple airports and also a lot of years as a consultant to aviation, and I still am. And I see both from major hub airports down to general aviation airports where sometimes, I don't know if it would be an advisory board, I can't remember now, but there are people, associated with, like in this case, the city, that would sit as advisory on selection boards. And I don't know if it's something legal would say is possible in our case, and I understand that, because it's different in a lot of places. But I think that's, again, repeating what's been said. We'd like to see if there's a way for you to take advantage of some of our backgrounds and experience, and at least maybe make comment that could be valuable. It's just we'd like to help.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate that, and it definitely, I think it'll take us time to learn one another and to navigate the process so that we can have that level of dialogue that's meaningful.
Yeah.
Because, when you talk about these proposals, Mike and I have got one now related to one of the marinas, and it's a lengthy, substantial document, and to be able to come present something like that in a format like this would be all but impossible.
Yeah.
So those are the challenges. Like I said, as soon as we can edit the market rate study, essentially, we'll share it with you guys. That's something that you might be able to take a look at and glean something from it and provide us feedback. So those kind of things, those are easy to share. Some of the things like complaints, things of that nature. We have hundreds of tenants between marinas, airparks, and the like, and certainly we handle a lot of things on a daily basis that would never rise to the level of engagement. If I had something that it was significant, I would certainly bring it to your attention. But I heard a plane fly over my house today. Probably not going to be something that resonates with me to the extent that I'm going to bring it before you. We've got some folks that complain more frequently than others. We have very few compared to what we had when I was a younger police officer and used to have to handle noise-related complaints at the Airpark. So from my perspective, it appears we've had a significant reduction in that type of thing. So that's a good thing, particularly in a person in my position, because I have to answer the question. We all have bosses.
I have two comments. One, Mike's got a copy of, I had sent him a letter, just comments about the sea hangar project. And one of the main things I really wanted to emphasize in that we had, unless I missed something, we as a board have never seen some of the basic layout of the hangar. And I think we could have made some improvements if we had been able to provide input on a major improvement to the Airpark. We knew it was coming, but not the detail of where grounding points go and where fire extinguisher poles, and there's,
The design was done during COVID, we didn't have board meetings.
yeah. So there was probably a valid reason why it didn't happen, but I'd like to see that it didn't happen the next time. And I don't remember ever seeing those plans when they built the D hangar. I don't remember ever being given the opportunity to review those. And I think, I know myself, as a user, I've been there for 12 or 13 years now, I've got my ideas, and not necessarily all the best ideas, I'm sure that somebody else, but I know you've got a lot of experience with this sort of thing, and even just practical little details. And the other comment, I'll admit I've got to ask a little bit, as a tenant, market rate study sounds like I'm not paying enough on my rent for the hangar. That's a very scary thing to hear. We don't. It's kind of intimidating.
Well, so we do those to make sure we're being equitable and make sure we're where we're supposed to be. So yes, as a tenant, anytime you hear market rate study, oh my gosh, I mean, as a city, when the city heard, salary studies, everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's that going to mean?
Yeah.
So like I said, I just skimmed through it to look for anything glaring, but
You say hangers are right, you're right on, right where you should be.
yeah. Mike's pretty loud.
Yeah, the T hangers are right where they're supposed to be. So we did this 3 years ago, as you all know, and I'm sorry? The rent rates are right where they're supposed to be. Mike McDonald, operations manager. So we did this same study 3 years ago, and we've made adjustments. So we expected that we would be right on when we conducted this study. We're just doing it to make sure that every aspect of, from office rents to commercial rent rates, but.
I just know if I go back and say, yeah, they said they're doing it, I'm going to get a lot of questions about it.
Yeah.
If you feel guilty about it, you write me a check every month.
I don't feel guilty in the slightest.
But ultimately, to answer your question, if we have a project that we have a design plan, and the way these, and some of you are familiar with them, but they go in phases, 30% design and so on and so on. Certainly, at a point where we're relatively certain that this is where it's going and what it looks like, is probably the appropriate time to engage. And that's usually at 30% you get a pretty good feel. But if we have a significant, design plan moving forward, it's no problem for us to either use the consultant to give you a presentation, or we can present it ourselves off a PowerPoint, just make that ask. But again, just to forewarn you, everything costs money. So, when you ask a consultant to come and take 2 hours out of their day and they bring 3 people in a PowerPoint, we pay for that.
Yep.
So, and some are, quite frankly, beyond my ability and Mike's ability to articulate these plans. Ed, a little bit different. He was an engineer, so I think he grasped some of those things. But I think that's the point that dialogue becomes important. If we have a plan, a diagram, some renderings, photographs, some things that kind of show you where we're going and what the thought process are. What happens is a lot of times we're constrained by strange codes. So just because we're a municipality doesn't mean we're immune to codes. So we end up with, I hate to blame my old counterparts in fire, but fire apparatus in strange places. We end up with firewalls and doors and things. We end up building restrooms at a boat launch that are 2 stories high because they're in the floodplain and they cost inordinate amounts of money because we're constrained by the same codes that everybody else is. So just because we're the government doesn't mean we get a pass and they say, well, Clearwater doesn't have to abide by the codes. So that's always an interesting nuance to these things too, is you know, you look at some of that, why in the world would you put that there? And it's some code buried somewhere. And I'm finding more of that as I'm learning this role.
Well, I think to Bruce's point, I don't think we necessarily need a full detailed explanation and, you know, PowerPoint presentation, but just to be shown, you know, pictures or something like you said, or a blueprint and saying, here's what we're thinking, because at that point we, you know, would have been able to give some input after some discussion, and or at least ask the question, and you can come back and be like, oh, well, it was a code issue. So then that's really all we needed, but we didn't even get that kind of thing. It was just the bathroom was supposed to go on this side of the hangar, and then all of a sudden it's on the other side of the hangar, and it was like, what happened here? And it just was like out of nowhere kind of thing.
I'll give you a trivial example, because it is trivial, but it's just to the point. They have grounding points inside the hangar. Okay, that sounds pretty good. You know, fuel is flammable and the sparks, that sort of thing. But the fueling point, or the grounding point, is right next to the metal of the structure, which is already grounded. So the grounding point, to me, should be right underneath the engine, so you could have a nice little 3-foot. I would hook it up every day if I had one underneath the engine. I would just constantly keep it. But it's over where it doesn't need to be. Nobody's going to put a 20-foot cord to go to this grounding point to trip over. And if they really wanted to, they just put a clamp on the metal that's already grounded. So it's like, what's it doing there? It's accomplishing nothing. I guarantee you nothing's ever going to be connected to it. I don't know what it costs to put them in, but I guarantee you nobody will ever use it because they're in a funny location. And maybe if I had seen that on a blueprint, I go, why can't it be over here? And then they go, yeah, maybe it could. Yeah, maybe. I don't know who required it to be. None of the other hangars have it. I think it's a good idea to have it. They're just not a very usable location. That's all. You know, trivial.
No, but
I'm just trying to emphasize the.
But to the end user, it's not trivial because it's like, why is this here and I can't use it? I mean, I get it. We find that sometimes. I mean, I'm like I told you, I have to qualify it here. I don't have that level of expertise. I look at some of these plans and I look at conduit runs and I look at all this stuff and like, okay, I understand this picture. Yeah, I think some of that would be beneficial. And again, I don't want to make promises that we can change the trajectory of some of these, because engineering and planning and folks that do this day in and day out. But, you know, some common sense stuff, at least we can report back and you can go, hey, what about this? And I can report back to our consultants or our engineering firm and go, hey, listen, what do you guys think about this? And if it's at a phase when we can make changes and it's changeable, there's nothing wrong with that. I would say that when those things happen, though, you know, it has to come from you guys as a consensus. Mm-hmm. So this body would have to come to a consensus to say, hey, can you bring this forward to the consultant as our liaison, this concern, and generate consensus. Now, if it's, you know, if it's a one-off, we got to be careful with those because, you know, every time someone has a different idea, then we end up playing ping pong a little bit. But
anybody else have any other questions?
Just that the best information on usability always comes from the stakeholders.
Sure.
So usually we agree. I'm the only one that every now and then will disagree. I represent the neighborhoods and the helicopters, and the Coast Guard and the sheriff. But
and again,
that's all. You know, the epitome of that was probably the original green print. It was a stakeholder document. It was adopted by the city, and we won a national award for mid-sized sustainability programs. haven't done a lot about it, but now we've got Greenprint 2, we're gonna try it again 10 years later, but the stakeholders are just like the example there, if we had said, why are they putting that at that end? Because we had the information and they know where it would be used,
Sure.
I admit it.
help you understand those blueprints.
I know when you build a house, if you add something, it costs a lot of money, delete something, it doesn't save anything. I know that, but
But no, we can certainly do that, and I think probably our next project will be the overlay, I would say, is where we're moving towards next. So, yeah, so one of those two, the shade hangers or the overlay, depending on the report we get back on the tarmac, so, you know, that's kind of, and our finances, certainly. That's always something that we have to take into consideration as an enterprise fund. You know, we're constrained more so. So we just have to be mindful of what our ability to pay. It's great. I mean, there's some things in the master plan that look really cool. I would love to pull them off, but I look at our bank account and I look at what things cost these days, and I recognize that we've got to focus on, you know, what's important for safety and operability today. And we can certainly be forward-thinking and look for opportunities going forward, but, you know, we have to really focus on those issues that are safety and quality of life, if you will, at the Airpark, you know. So if you've got a shade hanger and the corrosion's falling on your plane, that's a problem. So, you know, that's something that we're taking seriously. So.
From an ops standpoint, just a question for Barb. Do we get many turbine aircraft in the Airpark?
Many turbine
We get what?
Many turbine aircraft in,
We
small
do
jets?
Occasionally, you know, we are restricted somewhat by the length of our runway and the
Yeah.
fact that we don't have any instrument approaches, as Eric mentioned.
Right.
But we do get king airs. We had 2 king airs this week.
What about jets?
One,
Smaller jets, yes.
Smaller, yeah.
But occasionally.
Okay.
the Honda,
The Honda jet, we had that. This
Yeah, I
week,
know.
we had a Vision jet in.
Okay.
he was pretty
They're very
active a couple
small.
weeks ago.
See, this gets to, and here, the reason I'm asking this is, as the director brought up, you get fought on the tarmac, you get somebody spinning up, and you start blowing debris around. The other option, and I'm sensitive to because of my background, is, and I think all the jets we're talking about have higher engines, so there's no chance of sucking in some of that stuff. But that's why I wanted to know what we got in.
Right. Well, regarding FOD on the runway, you know, every morning we do a FOD check.
Yeah.
That's standard procedure. And it's foreign objects on the runway, so we do a check for that every morning, and then occasionally we'll do a second one. But, you know, occasionally we find little screws or things that fall off of
Right.
people's airplanes. What he's referring to is the apron area and all that, if there's loose rocks or
Right.
stones or anything like that, so.
golf balls.
They were good golf ball collectors.
Or golf balls, yeah. Not sure what the solution to that is, but, you know.
Can I, since you're standing there, Barb, can I ask about this helicopter thing? We were just hearing it at the EAA meeting Monday night about the boat picks guy coming in across the golf course and.
Yeah, I just had somebody
Out of pattern.
complain, I guess somebody was landing and we had a visitor, which was boat picks, as the way they described it to me. Evidently, he didn't follow the pattern, he just flew in, which happened to be about the same time somebody was landing. He was on the taxiway, and the way the wind was blowing and the fact that his rotor wash,
Yeah.
I guess, you know, tossed the airplane around a little bit, you know.
Sounded significant,
Of course,
according
yeah.
to Chris Berkman. And that was Gino with a student,
Right,
that
I
she
know.
was flying, and it sounded.
Yeah, Gino came and told me about it, and then Chris happened to see
Yeah.
it. And fortunately, Chris went out and spoke to the pilot and
Yeah.
told him what he
Yeah, he
did,
said,
and, you know, he should have followed the pattern, and that wouldn't have happened, so, right. No, nobody was injured I mean, Gino handled it, he just added power and went around, which is what you should do, and he
Absolutely.
did the right thing, so. I did want to address Kelly's question about Arcadia. I just looked it up on my phone. They're 67.8 miles away from Clearwater Airpark. They are self-service only,
Yeah.
and they are operated by the city of Arcadia, so it's not apples to apples. You're comparing two totally different operations.
Well, that's what I wanted to bring it up to, because I wasn't sure exactly
And I just
what you
wanted to
were looking
clarify,
at.
because I certainly wouldn't want anybody to think that we were doing
Yeah,
anything we
that helps
shouldn't
us be
do.
more informed, because we do hear it a lot of, you know,
Right.
why are you more expensive than this airport here or something, and,
Well,
I
you
don't
know,
really
when
all
somebody's
the background.
self-service, you know, they don't have to pay for a fuel truck, the lineman, the workman's compensation, the liability insurance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all expenses related to full-service fueling,
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yep, understandable.
okay?
Okay, so next will be board members to be heard. So if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna go first. So I wanted to give just a quick review, because we had discussed as a board to go to the city council and kind of give a review of what we had been doing for the board. We did that the end of last November, and just kind of talked about a little bit of background about the Airpark and informed the council. You know, you probably hear noise complaints, but you know, the Airpark has been here like 80 years, so these people are buying houses knowing that the Airpark is already there. And just talking about things that we had been discussing, and that we really wanted to be better advisors to the city. And we didn't feel that we had really been involved in as many things as that we possibly could have to have given feedback on things. And my impression was they seemed a little surprised to hear that. A couple of the council members asked, did we not feel like we could come to the council with suggestions for things as a board? And I wasn't sure if we were even allowed to do that. I thought we kind of had to wait for them to task us with something and then give our feedback on that. But according to them, they kind of wanted to hear our opinion on different things that the city was already looking at, or if we just had any suggestions of things like in the master plan that we would want them to be aware of. So one of the council members had brought up the city green print, which is, you know, is their green initiative to try to be more environmentally friendly, and they asked that we would review that. So I think it was Mike or Ed, one of them had sent that out to everybody, so if anybody had time to review it and kind of see some of the things that they were thinking of, and what options did we think could be possibly incorporated into the Airpark to address some of their initiatives. I'm not sure if anybody else got to read it, but some of the things that seem like a quick and easy thing, and I'm not even sure if this may already be done, would be switching out any incandescent lighting for LED lighting. I'm not sure if you know more about that, Barb. Like switching out any lighting that's there at the Airpark that uses incandescent lighting with LED lighting. I'm not sure if.
Well, what's been happening is as the lights in the hangars go bad, the ballasts, we've been converting those to LEDs,
Yeah, because they don't require ballast.
correct.
Yeah.
So as the ballasts go bad, I don't know if we've done any to your hangar,
I'm on LEDs.
right? But, you know, to just change them all out, you know, we just do it as needed. That could be something we'd have to talk to the city about, but.
Yeah, and was another one of those
Because
things.
technically, the way it's stated in the lease, when the bulbs burn out, it's up to the tenant to replace the bulbs, but for years, we have done it because it's just, they're up too high, you know, we've been buying the bulbs, even though we're not supposed to. We put them in, you know, I think the way it's stated in the lease is we could lend the tenant the ladder and you could put your own bulbs in, but, that's in our lease. But anyway, we do it because it's just much more convenient and safer for us to do it than have tenants up there trying to put bulbs in. But as they have been going bad, we have been changing them to LEDs.
Good.
Yeah, so that's great to hear, and that was another one of those things with having a couple of people to talk to. I wasn't sure where you guys were at with that, and if,
In
you know,
the
was
existing are fluorescents, which are not as bad as your incandescent. So they're kind of a halfway.
okay.
Right.
You know, they are.
Yeah, I don't know that we have any
LED is
incandescent. We have.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
We have either
either.
LEDs or fluorescents out there.
But if the city was like interested in something like that, I wasn't sure who incurred the cost as far, like if they wanted to do a total switch over of whatever is
Well, I
left.
know years ago, and I don't know if it would be in the record as far as the runway lights go, I think when Gordy was here, he did a study about changing all the runway lights, and I think it was tremendously expensive and not able to be done at that time. Whether they'll revisit that again in the future, I don't know, but I know when he looked at it, it was cost prohibitive.
Well, and I think stuff like that would be good to know as well, because then you could come back and at least tell the city council members of, this was looked at, and it, maybe sometime in the future, but right now, it's
Right.
pretty cost prohibitive to do that, but, maybe we could at least transfer the rest of the hangers into the
And I
LED
can
lights.
guarantee you the cost has gone up because
Yeah.
I'm putting LEDs in a lot of airports. So.
And so the other thing, of course, was solar, and I know Ed had talked about that before, about seeing if there was feasibility to put solar panels somewhere on the Airpark, but he thought there would have to be some more study into that to make sure there wasn't any kind of reflection issues or anything like that, so I'm not sure if anything went more with that at all.
I guess I have to circle back to ambitious plans versus practical plans. And I think the reality of some of these, and again, I like to see a consensus from council, and I think this body needs consensus from council to move forward with items too. So a lot of times we'll have a council member or two that have questions about things. That doesn't mean, because I don't work for council, that doesn't mean I'm acting upon those. Now certainly, is there an opportunity for solar? Yeah, there's an opportunity to put solar everywhere, but at what cost?
Yeah.
I think any solar project out there would have to be integrated with a rebuild of the terminal building, which, we've moved that down the road because it's cost prohibitive. We don't have the funds to do it. Enterprise fund is a little bit different again, and I can't be emphatic enough about that, is that the city can draw from general funds to do some of these bigger, loftier projects, whereas we're constrained by the need to come from our reserves. So, yes, there's absolutely an opportunity, but it would come vis-a-vis a larger project, I suspect. I think to just put an array out somewhere, I don't know that that's probably the best use of our resources to reduce, power consumption and carbon.
That's fine. My point with all of this and talking about these different things is that when I assume we do another presentation to the council later this year, that I could come back to them and say, we did discuss this as a board, and, based on cost prohibitive factors, some of these things probably wouldn't get done, but maybe future down the road, like when the FBO is rebuilt, it could be incorporated at that time, just so that we would have something, to bring back to them to say that, we did discuss it
Yeah.
and, talked about what was feasible and, some
So-
of this stuff wasn't.
So, I've been here, like I said, for over 30 years, and I've had quite a bit of experience with council, and it's a tough position to be before council and not, so you have your presentation and not to be able to predict what the next question's gonna be.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you're not gonna have the answer no matter how well prepared we are. So we prepare in this area, and when you go to give your annual presentation to council, you get a question out of left field, and those are really tough. So, my empathy.
Well, if you build the new terminal building, will there be any federal funds involved?
So it's state funds. We use the state.
Because if there are any federal funds, they require solar on any new construction.
Yeah, and what happens too is once you engage the federal component, then your rules change, and there's a lot more asks from the federal government in terms of hours of operation. And I think you probably, and I'm going on a limb here, so either you can kick me under the table, but you probably are more constrained, and you lose some autonomy when you take federal funds.
You're absolutely right.
So that's a guess.
Yeah, it would be wonderful. I mean, in the big infrastructure plan, there's a lot of money for airports, and it's partitioned off to where even general aviation facilities will get a chunk of money. I mean, not everybody, but there's, like you just said, there's a lot of, let's say, things you have to do in order to get that money, and obligations. You know, it doesn't come free. It's just not a handout that you can put the money in your pocket and go. So I don't really see that happening here.
A thought on solar energy, if a cooperative program between somebody like Duke or Tesla to do it for free, might be an interesting thought to pursue, but,
Yeah, I don't know enough about that, so
I don't
if you do.
But if we were to do a project on, let's say, the terminal, based on green print, we would be looking, engineering during the planning process would be looking at a solar component. So we're doing that with any new construction. So, you know, that's certainly part of the calculus when we're doing something of that magnitude. It's already incorporated into the thought process, you know. So how many square feet of roof do we have? What's, you know, and what would be the limitations? I don't think we have, you know, really any significant elevation limitations. I mean, they're not much higher than the roof, but again, it depends on how big the structure is. So yeah, that would be part of the process.
Yeah, I know I had brought up with Ed when he was talking about the shade hangers, if they may need full new roofs on them at the time, could you just put solar panels up there? And that was when he was bringing up, there may have to be some more research into if it would cause some sort of reflection scenario that may not be good. I don't really know if
Yeah,
they do.
I don't know either, and you know, I think it would be certainly on the existing terminal, it's a non-starter because it's a prefab, giant double wide, sorry. But that's what it is, so it wouldn't be conducive to it, you know. But any future projects, significant infrastructure project involving the terminal would definitely contemplate that.
I just sat through a presentation last Saturday on solar, and number one, the panels, the price is coming down. Number two, the capacity is going up. 5 years ago, the standard panel you see on a roof was a 300 watt, and it's up to 450 now, 4 years later. And the cost is coming down. The amortization 5 years ago on those 300 watt panels was about 7 years to what you would save, and it's down now to about 5 years. So those tables are out there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody, you know,
Oh yeah, I mean it's
has
very
got the
easy.
numbers and the studies, but
Yeah.
it's going to make sense. And I worry about spending money to light the bridge. Number one, just the cost of it. But what we're not talking about is the maintenance and the power bill on it.
Sure.
It costs a fortune.
Yeah, and you know, all those come into play, and if you retrofit an existing building and do a solar
Yeah.
intertie system is what you want. So you're not powering batteries to provide you power on downtime.
Yeah.
You're doing an intertie system, and essentially you're selling power back to the power company when you're using more, or you're producing more than you're using. I mean, that's the principle of it, and that's how you get your net benefit. But ultimately, you know, you have to contemplate, okay, what's the upfront cost for our limited budget, and then how do we benefit from that payback, you know, based on the lease construct. So, you know, you have to calculate that into a lease agreement, but it's a little more complicated than, okay, I use, you know, 2 kilowatt hours a day and I'm producing 4, but, you know, it's certainly something that they are integrating into any new projects, and I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing. It's an ambitious plan. It's a good plan for the future. It does address the environmental concerns and the carbon concerns and all those good things. And from an economic perspective, as you said, you know, eventually as the prices continue to come down, you know.
The ROI is closing down.
Yeah, and
Of course, they're not forever either, because eventually if we put them on the hangars now and we have to replace a roof 10 years from now, we got to take them all down
yeah. So I
and then put them back up.
have a cabin that we've powered with
I
solar
know.
power for many years.
Chassawitzka.
Yeah,
Still got it?
yeah, still got it. And
I was
ultimately,
worried about that.
about 25 years we got out of the array, and we just replaced them last year. So 25 years, good run. Yeah, so still got it.
Yeah, I've been up there with Tom Little.
Yeah, I suspected so.
So to continue on that, and I'm not sure if you want to stay there and maybe answer to this one too, or have some comment on it, but I know we have brought up as a board multiple times looking to try to get in Swift gas there at the Airpark. And now, I mean, we've said it's probably not gonna happen anytime soon, but now with the mandate that everybody needs to be on to unleaded by 2030, which sounds like a while from now, but I think that time's gonna go pretty fast. And to throw a wrench in that whole situation, the Environmental Protection Agency is looking into current rulemaking that would limit emissions from leaded piston aircraft, which could put more stipulations on needing to change over to unleaded a lot sooner than the 2030 mandate. So there is an Airpark resident who has looked into this and had requested from Barb in 2019 the type of aircraft that were there at the Airpark. He looked up to see if they were able to currently use non-alcohol auto fuel, and it was about 50% of the aircraft currently at the Airpark could either already use it or there was an STC available for them to start using it. Now, I was like, well, what about supply? And I guess he said he had looked into it, and McMullen Oil, who's over by PIE, they have the unleaded fuel there available to be a supplier, and he said he was pretty sure that the Airpark already uses them as a supplier of the diesel fuel for non-road use or something. He said it's over in a little trailer thing like we have the Jet A in. So I would still like to advocate for maybe being forward-thinking and trying to get another little trailer that just has, you know, maybe 300 gallons of
I know there's some issues with it, but yeah, go
the
ahead.
unleaded fuel in there.
So I was over at, sorry, I'll wait till I get over here. My bedaddle. I was over at Sun and Fun too for the statewide steering committee meeting, and my understanding and everybody there's understanding is the fuel that you're talking about is the 94 octane.
No, I'm not talking about, that's the Swift one. The unleaded aviation fuel is 89, 91, or 94.
Yeah, so the 94 is what's, I guess, common. And there's a couple places out in California, so they suspect that there might be one Airpark in the state of Florida that sells the unleaded fuel to the aircraft. So it's something that hasn't caught on here yet. They're still studying it, they're still looking into it.
Yeah, so Sebring has the 94 over there because they use a lot of road taxes over there. But I think it was something, and I'm not as familiar with all of this, the 94 was a little bit harder to use in some other aircraft that didn't use a road tax, but the 89 or the 91 unleaded option was easier, and I guess the STC is basically just a paperwork formality. There isn't anything that you need to change in the airplane itself. So I know that they're still doing some studies in it, but I'm pretty sure the FAA has already approved that unleaded 89, 91, and 94. I don't know if you know more about it, Bruce, at all.
Well, I know that there's, you know, it's one of these things, they have that whole fuel initiative that really thought they'd have a solution by now, and it has kind of dragged on, but this, of course, the one that I think is the most readily feasible is this GAMI 100, UL 100. It's still 100 octane fuel with no lead in it, and the unleaded or the non-ethanol gas is not the same as that. And, you know, I guess I think that we just gotta let that sort itself out. You know, I mean, putting in the infrastructure, I probably disagree with Bob on that one of trying to do a third fuel, jet, low lead, and gas when hopefully there's an unleaded aviation fuel somewhere in our future.
Well, I think that's the one that they've approved now as well too. I don't know if they're still
Well, it's
fine
not-
tuning it or not, so I don't know enough
It's
about
not
it, but.
totally accepted yet.
But I'm just thinking because next year is when they're supposed to take final action on this Environmental Protection Agency rulemaking, and it may come quicker than we think it's going to as far as
If the
transition.
EPA gets, ends up making a ruling, it's gonna expedite,
Yeah,
things are gonna have to happen.
yeah, so that's, I just kinda wanted to
Now,
bring
they've
it
had a
up.
couple of those airports in California that said, you can't sell unleaded fuel.
Yeah.
And they're going, say what?
Mm-hmm.
You know, or you can't sell leaded fuel, period, as of the end of this year.
Yeah.
And they're going, but there's no real alternative yet, you know, and that's probably not the right direction to be taking, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying we would be taking that direction at all, but,
Well, I just want to mention that I have spoken to our fuel supplier about this, and, he sent me a several-page thing where they, we sell Phillips 66. They are working diligently to come up with this testing, retesting, because they don't want to come out with a fuel that's not going to be compatible with airplanes that are existing. And, they're looking that what they're going to create is going to fit our infrastructure. And what you're talking about, that's just that little tank that we have from McMullen, that's just for Vern to use in the tractor and the diesel lawnmower. It's a we get like 300 to 500 gallons, so for the whole season he has that. And the thing that we have for the Jet A, we call it the Bowser, that's not where we store the fuel. That's only, the fuel is in the fuel farm. That is just holds 400 gallons so that we can pull that right up to an airplane. We used to have to pull airplanes to the fuel farm to fuel it. So
No,
that's not, if you were gonna go to a different type of fuel, you'd have to make sure, like Bruce said, it would fit our infrastructure. But we're waiting to hear what our fuel supplier in Phillips 66 has to say. They're gonna have it done in time for implementation, but again, they're doing all the checks and balances and making sure it's gonna be the best that they can give us, so.
Yeah, and I know that there would be a lot more time and money that would go into building additional fuel farm stuff, so my thought was just, well, for now, you could just keep only that 300 to 500 gallon, whatever you called it, buoy thing, and then, see how things went. But I do agree, because I don't know enough about it, of waiting until there is, the more information, I guess, out on the options and how well they work. But it was something I definitely wanted to bring up after seeing that Environmental Protection Agency thing, because I work with a lot of federal
well,
government.
they end up pushing it
things-
hard.
Yeah,
There's the one maker of tetraethyl lead. They're an English firm. They want out of the business. They said, we really would prefer not to produce it anymore, but we will continue to do it as long as aviation fuel requires it. And then we want to get out of the business when we can. So that's an incentive. This 2030 is fine. They need to establish a date and work towards it, because that's how things get done, is when you don't have any other alternatives. When the date's there and you have to make it happen.
Yeah.
But, the fuel initiative, whatever the name of those letters were, has not been as successful as I think most of us thought it would be by now. I remember listening to a thing at Oshkosh 5 years ago where we thought we were 2 years away, 3 years away. Years have gone by and we're not there yet.
all right, that was all that I had as far as extra things. Did anybody else have anything extra that they wanted to bring up?
I've talked.
No?
I'm
Talked
good.
enough? Okay, well then, I guess I would say if nobody else has anything else to say, we can adjourn the meeting. So I could get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, adjourn the meeting.